Most people think the way to beat a narcissist is to outsmart them, expose them, or finally say the one perfect sentence that leaves them speechless. It is not. That is where almost everyone loses. Because while you are trying to understand the game, they have already been living inside it for years. If they know how to pull you into circles, they know how to keep you hurt, confused, and still emotionally tied to them. But here is what they never want you to realize. The real moment they begin to lose is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not revenge. It is the quiet second you stop feeding the system that kept them powerful in the first place. And once you understand these 4 shifts, you will see why their control was never as solid as it looked. Stay with me, because the last one is the part they fear most, and once it clicks, you will never look at this dynamic the same way again. So many people spend years trying to solve the narcissist like a puzzle. They read articles late into the night. They replay old arguments in their mind. They go over text messages, facial expressions, tone changes, cold silences, fake apologies, all of it, hoping that somewhere inside the mess there is an answer that will finally make the pain make sense. They want to know why a person who once seemed loving became cruel. Why someone who promised safety became the source of fear. Why a person who looked so confident could act so petty, so punishing, so empty. But the truth that comes much too late for most people is this: understanding them does not rescue you. Studying every move they make does not set you free. And trying to fight them using their methods will never work, because this system was built long before you arrived. You are not dealing with a person who simply has a few bad habits. You are dealing with a deeply rooted pattern built around control, image, and emotional extraction. That is why this is not about becoming colder than them or smarter than them in some game. It is about seeing the structure clearly. It is about finally understanding what actually weakens their grip. And what weakens it is not your anger. It is not your tears. It is not your best speech. What weakens it is your clarity, your detachment, your refusal to keep playing a role in a system that was draining the life out of you. That is the shift. And once that shift begins, everything starts to change. Before you can understand the 4 ways they begin to fall, you need to understand one basic truth. The narcissist is not as solid as they seem. Under the confidence, under the charm, under the polished image and the way they carry themselves like they are always right, there is often a hollow center. No steady inner core, no grounded sense of self that can stand on its own. What exists instead is a performance, a false version of self built to cover deep shame, deep insecurity, and a buried sense of not being enough. That performance may look strong, but it is fragile. It needs an audience. It needs reaction. It needs praise, fear, attention, argument, pain, and emotional movement from other people to keep itself alive. Without that outside input, the whole structure starts shaking. That is why they are so dependent on the people around them, and why you, especially if you were close to them, became such an important part of the machine. Every time you explained yourself, they got something. Every time you cried, they got something. Every time you tried harder, defended your heart, begged to be understood, walked on eggshells, or stayed mentally wrapped around their moods, they got something. You became the emotional center they fed from. And for someone whose entire personality is built around needing to feel important, powerful, and central, that kind of supply is not small. It is everything. Listen carefully, because once you see this, the whole game starts to look different. Their strength was never fully theirs. A huge part of it was borrowed from your energy. The first shift happens when you begin taking your energy back, not as a performance, not as a trick, not as silent treatment while you secretly still think about them every minute. Real energy withdrawal is deeper than that. It starts inside your own mind. For a long time, your system may have been trained to orbit around them. The moment you wake up, you scan for danger. What mood are they in? Are they warm today or distant? Should you stay quiet? Should you say something first? Should you prepare for tension? That kind of mental tracking becomes automatic after enough chaos. Your body learns to monitor them for safety. And without even noticing, your attention becomes theirs. Your peace becomes tied to their weather. Your day bends around their reactions. That is not love. That is conditioning. That is survival. and it costs you more than you realize. It drains your focus, your joy, your creativity, your sense of direction. It takes your life force and pours it into someone who never planned to protect it. The first real move is to stop making them your emotional project. Stop letting their moods decide the temperature of your inner world. Stop spending your best thinking time on decoding someone who benefits from your confusion. This does not mean you become hard. It means you become available to yourself again. You start noticing your own body, your own thoughts, your own plans, your own future. You redirect your focus toward what is true, what is useful, what belongs to you. And yes, at first this feels strange. It may even feel wrong. Because when you stop obsessing over them, you are not just changing a habit, you are breaking a trauma pattern. That is why this step is powerful, and that is why they feel it faster than you think. But to really pull your energy back, you have to go through something most people try very hard to avoid. You have to grieve. Not the fantasy version of grief where you stay angry and call that healing. Real grief, quiet grief, the kind that admits something painful. The person you loved in the beginning may not have been fully real. The warmth, the focus, the attention, the intensity, the way they seem to see into your soul, all of that may have been part of the setup. It felt real to you because your feelings were real. But from their side, it may have been a strategy, a performance, or at the very least a temporary version they could not sustain. Accepting that hurts in a deep and lonely way because it means you are not just letting go of a person. You are letting go of a dream, a future, a promise, and a version of reality your heart wanted badly to believe in. But this grief is not your weakness. It is your doorway out. Because until you grieve what never truly existed, part of you will keep waiting for it to come back. You will keep hoping the early sweetness returns. You will keep explaining away the damage. You will keep handing them fresh chances that cost you and change nothing. Once grief starts doing its work, the emotional charge begins to fade, slowly, not all at once. You stop replaying every argument. You stop begging life for a different ending. You stop searching for logic inside behavior that was built on self-protection, not honesty. And as that charge fades, your energy returns to you. This is where the power starts shifting, not because you announced anything, because inside you are no longer available in the same way. And if you have ever wondered what truly unsettles them, it is this. Your calm, your distance, your growing lack of emotional dependency. When that energy begins to leave them, they usually do not accept it quietly. They test you, they provoke, they create little storms to see if your attention still belongs to them. Maybe they become extra charming, maybe they become colder, maybe they stir guilt, maybe they act wounded, maybe they start a pointless conflict just to pull you back into emotional motion. This is where many people panic because they think the reaction means the change is not working. It means the opposite. It means the system felt the loss. And your job here is simple, but not easy. Notice what is happening without getting recruited into it. See the bait without biting it. Feel the pull without obeying it. Let them have their mood without turning it into your emergency. That one shift alone changes the whole field because their power was never some magic force they created from nothing. It was influence made from your attention, your fear, your hope, your over-explanation, your emotional labor. Once you stop supplying those things in the old way, the power does not slowly weaken. In some moments, it seems to vanish right in front of you. And the strangest part is this. You begin to see that what once looked like strength was often just your own energy reflected back at you through a distorted mirror. Keep watching because the second shift goes even deeper. It targets the subject started to, the image, they hide behind, and that image is far more fragile than most people realize. And a narcissist lives inside a story about who they are. Maybe they are the smartest person in the room. Maybe they are the most generous. Maybe they're the victim no one understands. Maybe they are, the hero who is always betrayed by foolish, ungrateful people. The details change, but the structure is usually the same. In their story, they are special. They are above normal criticism. And if reality suggests otherwise, then reality must be twisted, denied, or blamed on someone else. That story is not just vanity. It is support beams. It is what protects them from feeling the shame buried underneath the image, which means if you confront the story the wrong way, you often get an explosion. You point out a lie and suddenly you are abusive. You calmly mention a contradiction and somehow you become jealous, unstable, unsupportive, impossible. The reaction feels oversized because you were not just correcting a detail, you were touching the wall that holds up their inner world. That is why fighting directly almost never works. Emotion gives them a way out. The second you come in, heated, wounded, desperate to prove your point, they shift the conversation away from facts and onto your tone, your reaction, your so-called instability. They are practiced at this. They know how to turn your pain into their escape route. So the second shift is not direct attack. It is calm exposure. You become a mirror, not a hammer, not a judge, a mirror. And a mirror does something very powerful with very little noise. It simply reflects what is there, no more, no less. That is what makes it so hard for them to control. Imagine they are telling a story that makes them look bigger than the truth. Maybe they are rewriting history. Maybe they are leaving out important facts. Maybe they are taking credit, twisting the timeline, or painting themselves as the innocent one in a situation you know very well. In the past, you may have either stayed quiet to keep peace or confronted them and paid for it later. The mirror approach offers a third path. You do not attack, you do not mock, you do not even sound impressed. You introduce one calm fact, one simple question, one grounded observation. That is interesting. I remember that a little differently. Or, I thought the decision was made before you came in. Or, how does that fit with what happened last month? No sharp tone, no emotional loading, no long speech, just reality placed next to performance. And that tiny shift matters more than it seems, because for a split second, the mask feels heavy to them. There is a flicker, a pause, a tightening in the face. They feel the distance between the image and the truth. And they also feel that you noticed it without giving them drama to feed on. That matters. When you do this consistently, something changes in the dynamic. You become difficult to perform around. The script stops flowing so easily. They cannot relax into the fantasy because your presence quietly brings reality into the room. And reality is what the false self cannot comfortably survive for very long. Do not miss the Katie. The Christi. Humiliate them. The goal is to stop cooperating with distortion. That alone is enough to weaken the structure. Of course, when the mirror starts working, they often push harder. If charm does not pull you back, they may use guilt. If guilt does not work, they may use rage. If rage fails, they may suddenly become soft, apologetic, reflective, almost believable again. They may bring up your old wounds. They may press on your insecurities. They may use private things you once shared in trust. They may act as if you have changed in some cruel or unnatural way simply because you are no longer easy to control. This stage can be deeply unsettling because part of you may still want to explain, to defend, to prove you are not the person they are suddenly painting. But that urge is the old trap. The more you rush to correct the story, the more emotional material they get to work with. Steadiness is what protects you now. Not perfect words, not the perfect comeback, just steadiness. Calm facts, minimal openings, clear self-possession. When you stay grounded, they run into something they cannot easily bend. And over time, that becomes exhausting for them. It becomes harder to keep you in a scripted role, harder to rewrite your reality, harder to use confusion as a leash. This is where the third shift begins to grow. Because once you stop giving them your mind in the old way and stop agreeing to distorted reality, you start returning to yourself, not the anxious self, not the careful, edited version of you built to avoid punishment, the real self, the one that was there before all this tightening, shrinking, explaining, and self-doubt began. There is a moment, and if you have lived this dynamic, you know exactly what I mean. When something quietly changes inside you. It is not dramatic. It is not a movie scene. It may happen while washing dishes, driving home, staring at the ceiling, or sitting in silence after yet another confusing interaction. Suddenly, the old explanation stops landing the same way. Their voice says you are too sensitive, too needy, too difficult, too broken, but something inside you does not fully buy it anymore. A small piece of you wakes up. That moment matters more than almost anything else because it is the first crack in the conditioning. The third shift grows from that crack. It is the process of becoming fully yourself again, so fully yourself that there is no loose psychological space left for them to occupy. Their control was never only about force, it was about finding the parts of you that were uncertain and moving in, the part that doubted itself, the part that wanted approval, the part that feared abandonment, the part that had not yet learned how to trust its own perception. They found those openings and made them wider. They trained you to second guess what you felt, apologize for what you needed, and shrink what was true so they could stay comfortable. The third shift reverses all of that. You begin reclaiming your opinions. You begin returning to your own values. You reconnect with what matters to you, not what keeps them calm. You remember your old interests. You speak a little more plainly. You stop shaping every decision around their mood. You become a full person in your own life again. And that is not a small thing. That is the beginning of freedom. This return to yourself is not loud at first. In fact, some of the deepest changes are almost invisible from the outside. You start noticing when your body tightens around them. You start listening to that signal instead of overriding it. You stop explaining simple decisions that never needed a trial. You reconnect with people who make you feel real. You allow yourself preferences again. You let yourself dislike what hurts. You let yourself want what nourishes you. You stop treating your own needs like evidence against you. That may sound basic, but after long, exposure to narcissistic control, these are radical acts because every step toward your own solid center closes off another entrance they once used. Guilt works less when you know your heart. Shame works less when you know your worth. Fear works less when you slowly prove to yourself that you can survive disappointment, silence, withdrawal, and even loss. This is what makes the third shift so powerful. You are not fighting them every day. You are occupying yourself. You are standing in rooms inside your own mind where they used to roam freely. And the fuller you become, the less space there is for their manipulation to land. This is why healing is not passive. It is not just feeling better. It is structural. It changes the architecture of your inner life. And once that architecture changes, their old keys stop fitting the locks. Stay with me now, because the fourth shift is where the entire pattern reaches its breaking point. The fourth shift is the full removal of supply. And this is the one they fear most because it is the most final. Supply is not just praise. It is not only compliments or admiration. Supply is any reaction that tells them they still matter enough to move you. Anger is supply. Panic is supply. Long emotional texts are supply. Defending yourself for hours is supply. Visible hurt can be supply. Even the desperate hope that maybe this time they will understand can become supply because it proves you are still emotionally wrapped around them. As long as they create reaction, they can still feel influence. And influence is the oxygen of the false self. Removing supply does not mean becoming a robot. It means reaching a place where their methods no longer produce the emotional effect they were designed to produce. The insult hits, but it does not split you open. The guilt trip comes, but it does not drag you into shame. The silence appears, but instead of panic, you feel space. The sudden affection returns, but it does not melt your boundaries because you already grieved what that affection used to represent. This kind of detachment is not coldness. It is healed distance. It is emotional sobriety. It is what happens when reality matters more to you than the fantasy bond. And when this shift becomes real, not acted, not staged, not temporary, something begins happening inside them that no revenge scene could ever accomplish. They are left standing without the emotional reflection they depended on. No applause, no panic, no chase, no chaos to feed on just themselves. And that is the place they spend their whole lives trying to avoid: the emptiness, the shame, the lack of a stable inner self, the restless need for outside confirmation. When your reactions are no longer there to distract them from that inner void, they face something unbearable, not always in a conscious way, not always in words, but they feel it. The agitation rises, the image work increases, the attempts to pull you back may get stronger. For a while, some become louder, some become sweeter, some search for a replacement audience fast, some run a smear campaign so they can keep the story intact, some act like none of it matters while quietly unraveling behind the scenes. The forms vary, but the inner truth stays the same. They lost access to a source that once helped hold their false structure together. That is why your freedom shakes them more than your anger ever could. Anger still revolves around them. Freedom does not. Freedom walks away emotionally before the body even leaves the room. Freedom builds a life they are no longer the center of. Freedom laughs again, sleeps again, plans again, chooses again, and stops checking the emotional weather every 5 minutes. Freedom is ordinary in the most powerful way. It cooks dinner. It answers fewer messages. It enjoys peace without guilt. It says no without writing an essay. It stops making sacred meaning out of someone else's dysfunction. That is what they cannot stand. Not because you attacked them, because you no longer need them in order to define yourself. And once that is true, the whole machine starts starving. Still, this process is rarely neat. There may be moments when you slip. Moments when you react again, over-explain again, cry again, miss them again, even crave the very bond that hurt you. That does not erase the work. It does not mean you failed. It means you are human. This kind of healing is not a straight line. The nervous system takes time to learn what the mind already understands. There may be days when you feel strong and days when you feel pulled backward by memory, chemistry, habit, loneliness, or hope. On those days, remember this. Progress is not proved by never feeling pain. Progress is proved by returning to yourself faster, by noticing the pattern sooner, by refusing to hand over your whole identity just because an old trigger lit up. A narcissistic bond often trains you to distrust your own pace, your own judgment, even your own healing. So be patient, but do not be passive. Keep building the life that supports clarity. Sleep better, eat regularly, talk to people who do not make you feel crazy. Write down what really happened so confusion cannot rewrite history. Let your body experience calm again and again until calm becomes familiar. This matters because the deepest break from a narcissistic dynamic is not just intellectual, it is physical, it is emotional, it is spiritual, it is learning that peace is safe, it is learning that love does not have to be earned by suffering. It is learning that your nervous system was never meant to live in permanent anticipation of impact. And once your body starts believing that, the old hooks lose even more of their grip. There is also something else that happens when you stop feeding the system. You begin to see how much of your life was waiting for you on the other side of survival mode. The goals you paused, the friendships you neglected, the hobbies that went quiet, the parts of your personality that became smaller because they caused too much friction, slowly they return, maybe not all at once, maybe not in the same form, but they return. You laugh differently. You think more clearly. You stop asking for permission you never needed. Your mind has more room. Your body has more breath. You stop treating every interaction like a risk assessment. This is one of the most beautiful parts of the process. And it is also one of the most threatening things from their point of view, because your restored life is proof that their control was not destiny. It was a condition, and conditions can end. That is why even your growth can disturb them. A happier face, a calmer tone, a boundary held without drama, a decision made without consulting their moods. These things seem small, but in the language of power, they say something huge. They say, you are no longer the center of my emotional world. And once that message becomes real, they can feel it even if you never speak it aloud. This is why you do not need a grand final speech. You do not need them to admit what they did. You do not need them to understand your pain in order for your healing to count. Some closures happen without permission. Some endings become real because you stopped participating, not because they agreed to end the game. And here is the part many people overlook. The deepest consequence a narcissist ever faces is not being exposed online, humiliated in public, or beaten in some dramatic argument. It is losing reliable access to the person who once carried so much of the emotional weight for them. It is losing the one who cared, explained, tried, repaired, softened, returned, and stayed emotionally available long after the relationship stopped being safe. When that access disappears, they are left with their own unfinished inner world, the shame they projected, the chaos they exported, the worthlessness they tried to make you carry. It all has fewer places to go. Again, this is not something you have to engineer. It happens naturally when you become less reachable to the pattern. That is why your job is not to punish.